Hi, I'm Laurent Bouzereau, producer of this exciting DVD presentation of Alfred Hitchcock's Frenzy. For those of you familiar with the trailer of Frenzy, Alfred Hitchcock was shown floating on the River Thames. As you can see, I settled for something a little more simple. Yet, since I traveled all the way to London to meet with the screenwriter of Frenzy, Anthony Schaffer, here are some very exciting stories about the making of Alfred Hitchcock's Frenzy. And for those of you wondering what happened to my tie, where some very suspicious fellow borrowed it from me last night.
How'd you like my tie?
Frenzy was one of those movies where the Hitchcock touch came back.
Now, do I look like a sex murderer to you?
This was just a good, rumbustious Hitchcock with a few scary bits in it.
You strangle her like all the others.
He wanted to become more explicitly violent.
There's a texture that you can get by using humor and giving it to the blackest character in the piece.
Hitch made a lovely atmosphere on the set.
You got the whole of your life ahead of you.
It was good fun, good ironic fun.
That man must be a sexual maniac.
The beast.
I haven't murdered anyone.
Really, the world has become darker than ever in Frenzy.
I wonder what the rest of the day has in store.
I had just done Sleuth on Broadway, and we had received a notice like The Second Coming, which was very gratifying. And Hitch, you know, always used successful writers. And I had had that success, and therefore I was not completely surprised that Hitch got in touch with me. Mind you, it's such an honor to be invited, because he was such an incredible legend, that at first I thought it was a bit of a hoax, because this happened on New Year's Eve. Someone, answered the phone for me and said, "Is Alfred Hitchcock on the line?" I said, "Yeah." I thought it was one of my mates in New York. I said, "I was telling him to come out and have a drink, A few minutes later, the actual book arrived, which was the book from which the film was derived, a book by a writer called Arthur LeBurn called Goodbye Piccadilly, Farewell Leicester Square. This tended to convince me this was not a hoax, and we took it from there. That's how that started. Alma was, of course, his wife, and she was a tiny little lady. And whilst we were here prepping Frenzy, she had a heart attack. Not he. He had a pacemaker, Hitch. But the one to have the heart attack was Alma. It slightly affected the work necessary for doing the picture, but she recovered very quickly and, in fact, survived him.
I think why Hitchcock asked me to play it was, at that moment, I hadn't had a big film released, but I just finished Macbeth for Roman Polanski, which was big news at the time. Hadn't opened. And, of course, I was going to be cheap, you see. Now, it was a very cheap film, Frenzy. They didn't spend a lot of money. They didn't, for example, provide cars for anybody to go to the set or go to the studio. You just got your own taxi or you came on a bike or whatever you did, So anyway, they just asked me to do it. So they go through a book, you've got a casting director. Casting directors don't do a lot. I mean, there's not much they can do. But they say, well, there's so-and-so, how about him? And Hitchcock presumably said, yeah, I think he looks all right. What's he doing at the moment? So my agent went, oh, yeah, would you like, I'll get Roman Polanski. Roman was doing everything down in Shepperton. He was saying, I'll do anything. You want to see the film? I'll show you rough cuts. I'll do this and do that. Hitchcock didn't want to see a frame, nothing. But he said, I've got to see whether he can act and what he looks like on film. And my agent got a television movie that I'd done, simple thing, shot in black and white in '69, I think it was, and showed it to him. So he said, yeah, it'll do. So I came to see him round the corner from the Dorchester, which is where we are now. And he said, John, nice to see you, blah, 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 blah. I was, like half in shock seeing the man anyway. Do you like the script? I said, yes, of course, as you do. And so he said, I've seen the film that your agent showed me. You can act. That's good. Would you like to do it? Yes, I would. OK, let's go and have lunch. And that was it. So it was done. And of course I couldn't believe it.
Secretary. I didn't go up for Babs. And we went into this huge, I went alone to this huge, vast room in Piccadilly where he was doing the auditions. And he sat behind this desk. I sat down, and he started talking about deep refrigeration and how to make batter. There was this huge room, he said, he had in his house, which was his fridge. And he told me how he made batter for batter pudding, and he kept it in this vast fridge. So I was completely mesmerised by this. Then he started talking about this barmaid. I was totally confused by this time because he hadn't asked me to read for the secretary or anything. Anyway, this woman, this barmaid, had to be quite short. And I found myself taking my shoes off. But I don't know why, because I wasn't up for the barmaid. I was up for the secretary person. Anyway, when I got up to go, of course, I'd forgotten that I'd taken my shoes off, so I had to put my shoes on. And he didn't say whether he wanted me or not. Nothing. No script was given. And the next day, my agent rang and he said, he wants you for the Cockney barmaid, Babs. I said, this is amazing. So I said yes to work with him.
I'd had a couple of successes in the West End on stage, and I was doing a play by David Mercer at the Criterion called After Haggerty with Billy Whitelaw. Someone said, Alfred Hitchcock's in tonight. Right. Next morning, my agent said, Mr. Hitchcock would like to meet you at 100 Piccadilly. So along I went. He said, I'm making this picture about a murderer. I'd like you to take the script away and tell me if you'd like to play it. So, well, the short story is that he sent for a couple of books about a pretty well-known murderer we had over here called Neville Cleveley Heath, who masqueraded as a squadron leader. And I went off on a short holiday to read them, came back and made the picture. And I always thought, when people asked, how on earth did you get the part? I said, well, he came to see the play. It was halfway through shooting the picture, I was talking with his personal assistant, Peggy Robertson. And she said, oh, no. That isn't how you got the part. What happened was that I'd made a film a few years earlier called Twisted Nerve, again with Billy Whitelaw. And this picture, in almost all the notices, they referred to it sort of having a Hitchcock flavour to it. And apparently, seeing me in the part I played in that decided I would be okay for Bob Rusk in Frenzy. So that's how wrong you can be about where you got where you...
All right, rehearsal bell. You know her very well. Something's up. On the other hand, Anna, you don't know her.
He was most respectful, terribly kind. If you were in trouble, you could go to him, ask him anything. If you didn't understand how to play a scene, if you wanted a line change, which sometimes we did.
May I say something? This has been put here. It's
Yes.
going to be fairly crucial later on. I don't know what that's meant to be.
Now, wait a minute. A handbag with gloves have been placed in a strategic position.
We were going to ask you before we shoot where you would like them, because she says she's going shopping at the end, doesn't she? So it's
Yes,
matter
but
of
a
where you-
woman like that would leave her handbag and gloves in the bedroom. They would be on the dressing table if she went shopping or fishing.
I used to write notes every single night to his secretary, Peggy.
Oh, yes, sure. Yes.
And he was very good. Most of the time, he'd say, all right, yeah, just correct it. He wasn't annoyed that I'd pointed out maybe a syntactical error or something like that. He did say once, John, he said, I said you could make alterations. I didn't say you could rewrite the whole script, so, which I was trying to do, I must have been.
Action.
He was shot almost entirely in Pinewood Studios, in sets built in the studios. Things like the interior of the office where the famous murder took place, the interior of the pub and so on. The rest of it was shot mainly in Covent Garden itself. Covent Garden was then the fruit and vegetable and floral market for London.
It's a very London film, and I know he wanted to make that. I think he thought, whether he thought rightly or wrongly is another matter, that people thought that he had rather sold out and gone to live in Hollywood. I personally don't think that he would have been a world success he became had he stayed here in England.
Here is the scene of another horrible murder. This is the famous London wholesale fruit and vegetable market, Covent Garden. Here you may buy the fruits of evil and the horrors of vegetables. I've heard of a leg of lamb, a leg of chicken, but never a leg of potatoes.
When we were filming in Covent Garden, a curious thing took place that a very old man came up to him. I remember the security men running in fairly quickly because you know what goes on these days, or even in those days. It wasn't quite as bad, but nonetheless. And he said, "I remember your father here in the market."
His father was a very well-off greengrocer. He had a chain of stores, you know, where he sold fish and greengrocery and all that. So he grew up with this.
Hitchcock was delighted, of course. He said, leave him alone, sat him down, had a long talk with him about his dad, gave him a great meal, and sent him on his way. It's a nice touch. But he was finding and feeling his roots as they had been.
He had a crack team, you know, fabulous operator, fabulous Gil Taylor, fabulous lighting.
He had great fun with the cameraman, especially the camera operator. He used to say, one button up, sir, or something like that. He'd be that precise. He'd know whatever lens you put on, he could tell exactly what the end result was going to be in the camera.
The difference between the novel and the movie script is that we added a lot of comedy noir, which Hitch was always very fond of. And in particular, in those scenes of exposition where the detective, Alec McCowan, is brought to realize that on the basis of a lot of circumstantial evidence, he has arrested the wrong man who is currently in jail. And how does he come to realize that he has made that mistake? So the way to do it, I thought, was to do it as comedy. And the comedy comes, of course, from his wife, played by Vivian Merchant, who is a gourmet cook. And she keeps giving him the most repulsive and inedible meals.
It looks like a pig's foot.
That's what it is.
Bernard Herrmann. Henry Mancini, I think, did the original score and then was let go. He brought Ron Goodwin in after letting Mancini go, and I think he did a very good job. It's the return to England, too, that Hitch probably infused that in the composer. There's a certain kind of nostalgia that Hitch must have felt. That comes across in the score.
Let's go, please. First possession, straight away.
He was a revered character. He was one of the greatest names in 20th century history, let alone the film industry.
You should turn and look out.
Had to look
Then
around.
down.
I thought it was right up there in terms of his later work, in as much as it had Chasing the Wrong Man, the amusing villain, and the discussion of married life and its ups and downs.
It's a very brutal film, but it's full of things he loves, like food and London. It's a very loving portrayal of the Covent Garden market. because now that's moved over to 9 Elms in Battersea. And we knew at the time that Covent Garden wasn't going to be there forever. And Barry and I remember saying to one another, this will be a very exclusive